Okay, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the Audit and Governance Committee on the 24th of February 2025. We're live streamed on YouTube, so welcome to any members of the public who are joining and watching on that, and welcome to members and officers who are joining us today. Externally, we've got members of the external audit team. One's in here at the moment and one's at the moment doing another audit committee, but is going to come in shortly. So it's a very busy time for the audit world. We've also got a new member of the team joining us from internal audit, just observing today. So welcome Simon. So thank you for that. And I'll just look to the clerk, Jenny, to see if there's any apologies for non-attendance today, please.
Sorry, Chairman. We've had apologies from Mark Dickinson, the Assistant Director of Finance and Strategy, and Councillor Richard Lavelle. There was some confusion with Councillor Jim Hakewell. He didn't think he'd had a seat, but I have him down as a member of this committee. I did email and tell him that, but that might be why he's not come, because he doesn't think he's got a seat.
I think that just before we come on to that, I think there's some other apologies as well. Councillor Marks, are you raised? Okay, so if you record Councillor Roberts and Councillor Eakins has some apologies as well. At full council, we recalibrated, or whatever the term is, the members of all the committees, and Councillor Hakewell was no longer on the committee, so that was correct. So obviously he was on for some time, so I'd like to thank him for his attendance and contribution during that time. But due to the numbers, he's no longer on that committee. Okay, so that's the apologies. Move on to the second agenda item, which is members' declarations of interest. Are there any declarations that members wish to make which haven't already been made? Relevant to this agenda? No. Thank you for that. And the third agenda item is the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of November 2024. Are there any points of accuracy there? I did receive a note which went to Democratic Services from Councillor Level. And he wanted to make sure it was an emphasis on the voting and his concerns about the approval of the accounts, and he didn't feel it was reflected strongly enough in there. So I will be speaking to Democratic Services and asking them to adjust for that small point to reflect the concerns that he had there. So subject to that minor amendment, members content for those minutes to be approved. Proposer, Councillor Marks, if there's a seconder. Thank you. And yes, Councillor Jelly. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's unanimous. If we move on to the main items for discussion, agenda item 4 is financial statements accounts for 23-24. I'll be handing over to Claire Edwards, our Section 151 officer. Obviously, we all know, because we've been in this committee for a long time, the unusual position we're in, and there'll probably be quite a bit of reference to the peculiar context we have and why we're in this situation. So I'll hand over to Claire to present this agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm going to hand over to Dean Mitchell, who's going to present the report, and has actually been very key and instrumental in delivering the accounts that we have for North Northamptonshire and undertaking all the audit work. Before we do carry on, I would like to have a big thank you to my team, including especially Dean, in making sure that we've been able to deliver 3 sets of accounts back to back, and the amount of work that we've undertaken during this audit process has actually been immense, and I can't thank the team enough. So I just wanted to put that on record. So thank you, Chair. I'll pass over to Dean. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Claire. But it is a team effort. The report sets out the Council's financial statements for 23-24, and these can be found at Appendix A. The report seeks approval for the draft statement of accounts and for approval of the management representation letter at Appendix B. As previously reported to this committee, the backstop date for 23-24 for the statement of accounts is the 28th of February 2025. Draft statements were shared with the external auditors in October 24, following completion of the disaggregation, having previously shared a draft in July 24. Over several months, the Council have responded to over 700 audit queries, many requiring multiple pieces of evidence. So to put this in context, over 2,000 pieces of evidence have been shared with our external audit colleagues. Over 89% of all samples were responded to with all of the evidence, and in most cases, evidence was provided for the remaining sample. However, further requests were raised. It is pleasing to see that where samples have been returned, no material misstatements are being raised by the auditors. The finance team have been working closely with the external auditors to prioritise areas where the council can move away from a disclaimer position as soon as possible. So just to refer you back to the recommendations, Chair, which are to approve the statement of accounts for 23-24 and the management representation letter. I'm happy to take any questions through you, Chair.
Okay, I'll look to members see if they've got any points or queries they'd like to raise on these sets of accounts. In which case, I'll move straight to those recommendations, which are set out under 3.1. And the first is to approve the draft statement of accounts for the financial year 23-24, which is set out in Appendix A in the letter of representation in Appendix B. Can I look for a proposer, Councillor Marks, and seconder, Councillor Jackson? Thank you. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's unanimous. And it's also recommended that any non-material adjustments required to the draft statement of accounts for the year are delegated to the Council's Executive Director of Finance and Performance, the Section 151 officer, in consultation with the Chair of the Audit and Governance Committee. Can I look for a proposer for that? Councillor Marks, and a seconder again, Councillor Jelly. Thank you. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's unanimous. I'd also at this point just like to highlight, just for good order and transparency, in the minutes last time it referred to the approval of the accounts and the audit, and then we all felt that they were subsequently signed off and filed. I'm going to hand over to a Section 151 officer and just give a bit of explanation, because we received a note which it was felt that we didn't file those in time, but I just want to make sure everybody's aware of what the situation was there, and what the opinion of the auditors and the Section 151 officer is. If I just hand over there, thanks.
So thank you, Chair. So just to sort of bring you up to speed, we obviously took the accounts to committee last time for 21-22, 22-23 to meet the backstop date for the 13th of December, which was duly done and signed off. Audit opinion was also received and signed off, so we felt that we had extinguished our responsibilities at that point to meet the backstop date. We had published the accounts. We then had to republish them to ensure that we had the audit opinion on there. In doing so, we had to wait for some signatures and some technical issues around publishing them, which was done slightly after the backstop date. Unfortunately, from a central government perspective, we were contacted to tell us that we hadn't published in time. We quite vehemently went back to provide evidence that we had in many ways, either through the audit and governance agenda and obviously the accounts themselves, but they were intending to issue a letter with Northamptonshire on there with many other councils that we hadn't published but published subsequently after that date. So we felt that the requirements were to sign off the audit by the backstop date. And again, we did contact our colleagues at our external audit team, and they felt we'd also complied as well. So again, slight confusion in terms of what they were going to do, in terms of making sure that that had been adhered to. But I just wanted to reassure you that even though it was the 13th, I think we published the accounts like 2 days after that date, or republished them. So there was some slight confusion. We're already set up, ready to go to publish everything for 23-24 by the backstop date on the 28th of February. So that's all ready to go. Okay.
Sorry, could I just, what are the ramifications of that? I mean, what happens? If we just get told off?
We just have our name published on a letter somewhere.
Oh, okay.
I'll give my opinion. I think meeting this one is much more important, this backstop. I'll look to the auditors and see if they'll give us their opinion. I found it really quite galling because of the hard work that had been done, number one, by the auditors, and number two, by the officers, and then it was just a technicality. But I think the more important one is coming now, but that's only my opinion. I'll let Claire add something if she wishes, but I'll ask Paul's opinion as well, because the view that they explained to me was they felt everything had been done in time. So maybe if you give us your opinion, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not sure what more I can add. Obviously, there was the backstop date. We issued our opinion before that date. You made sure that you had the public inspection, and that was completed in time for us to issue our audit opinion. Yeah, we thought we complied, and you'd complied with the requirements.
Yeah, I think all we can do is just use it as a learning point, and we will make sure. Obviously, it's only a matter of days now, but that will. I'm not saying it will, but I'm pretty certain it will be done. Okay. Did you want to add anything there?
Just to add that we're ready to go and make sure that it is published on the day, and that we have no issues with getting it published. Again, in all the years I've been in local government, never been asked to provide that evidence. So, it's quite bizarre that they are doing it now. But again, I suppose it's just to make the point that they are looking and observing in policing that date and adherence to it.
Thank you for that. Paul, would you like to add something further?
Yeah, just one more thing on that. Like Claire said, they've never chased these deadlines in the past. I think this is a sign of their intention, along with the backstop, with introducing the backstop, is they are going to start holding councils and auditors to account where audits are backstopped. And I think there is plans to produce lists of councils that were backstopped and the reasons why they were backstopped going forward.
Okay, thank you for that. If there's no questions on that, it just as committee members, we may be asked by other council members or members of the public, technically, that it might have been a day or two late, but we felt that it was okay. The fifth agenda item is the external audit update, and I think I mentioned at the start, the partner, Mark Stocks, has got 3 audit committees today, and he's actually in another one at the moment. I'll just look at Paul now and see, would it be okay to do parts of these, or should we wait and bring him in for the entirety of this, and I can move on to later agenda items?
I think it's probably best to come back to them all, so we can go through them all once he's back.
Okay, so we'll just change the order then slightly, and I'll move on to agenda item 6, which is whistleblowing policy update. And I'm pleased that Camilla Coulson-Patel is in attendance today and is going to present this item, the Deputy Monitoring Officer. I think we've spoken in the past about what our focus has been very much on internal audit, risk management, audit and accounts, and I think this is part of us pivoting more to get some more assurance over the governance aspects of our responsibilities under our terms of reference. So I'll hand over to Camilla now to present this item. Thank you, Camilla.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Just for those of you who may not be familiar with me, I'm Camilla Coulson-Patel, the Deputy Monitoring Officer and Assistant Director of Legal and Democratic Services. I'm presenting for you today an update on the review of the whistleblowing policy. Members will recall that we had a training session back in November 24 where we took some really helpful ideas and had some positive engagement with members of the committee. This report today brings that update to you on the next steps intended. So as you'll see in the report there, this policy was implemented in 2021 in April, and it was reviewed in November 24, and it does still remain legally compliant. However, as part of that initial review, it was identified that it would benefit for a review and update to reflect the organisational practices and to provide greater clarity. The monitoring officer is the owner of this policy, and it is expected that the policy ensures that matters of serious concern are addressed and recorded. The process that is currently in place is set out in the report at paragraphs 4.6, 4.7. At paragraph 5 of the report, I trust that members have had the opportunity to read it all in advance, so I don't intend to go through it line by line for you. But I would like to draw your attention to paragraph 5, which are some of the areas that we've identified for improvement, which are to provide examples within the policy of what does whistleblowing look like, what may fall within that category. Signposting to support and signposting to the regulators. It is also considered that it will be beneficial to cross-reference it against the existing policies now that we are a more mature authority. And finally, to improve clarity on the process. There is also, within the report, you'll have seen an opportunity to look at the way that whistleblowing is recorded and reported. So an online form is something that we're exploring as an option, as well as opening the opportunities for those persons who can receive a whistleblowing concern and to extend that to the Chief Internal Auditor. Those are very much as part of the review process, the review steps that we'll be looking to take, but certainly would reflect the best practice that we see nationally and would increase the visibility on that. Just finally, in terms of the next steps that we would like to see from this, once the review is completed, we would like to bring the updated policy for you to comment on and hopefully endorse that policy there. And from that, additional training to be offered throughout the organisation. Through the informal discussions that we've had with our corporate leadership network, as well as the connecting managers sessions, it is highlighted that this is an area that needs enhanced visibility and refresher training. So the best time we suggest to do that is off the back of a new policy. So we hope to take any comments that you have today and then begin that review exercise with a view to updating the policy. The recommendations are set out at paragraph 3.1 of your report, and I'll take any questions or observations that members may have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that report and presentation. I'm looking to members to see if there's any questions or comments or observations. Michael Whitworth, thank you.
Yeah, hi. Could you just clarify, training aside, how people are made aware of the policy and who they should report into, just so that everyone's clear how it, what the steps are?
Yep, so the current process is part of the officer induction programme. So as an officer, when you start in the organisation, you are expected to undertake certain mandatory training, and in addition to that, read and become familiar with the policies. At the moment, that is the extent of that sort of engagement that we have. There are certain things that we do around raising awareness around fraud, anti-corruption, bribery, and this definitely sits in that space. But right now, it's read the policy, and within the policy, it does document how and where to report that, namely to the monitoring officer.
Okay, so my only suggestion on that would be that some people can be here for 20 years. You do it at the beginning and then you've forgotten. It's often quite useful to even to have a notice in where the coffee's made or whatever, just around the place, so that people will read it when they're waiting for something to happen. It just keeps it fresh in people's minds.
Yes, I think that would be a really helpful idea. Anything that we can do, whether it's part of a wider piece of work, as I say, the work that we do around fraud, bribery and anti-corruption, to link it into that, or whether it's part of our HR campaign, or whether, as you say, a standalone poster that might be in the coffee room as part of a campaign. Really good idea.
Thank you, Michael. I think that was a very good point. Obviously, it picks it up on the inductions, which is the new staff. Is there any type of compulsory training and delivery mechanism that we use, such through a learner management system or something like that, where we can push it out to all staff, which is how you get that comprehensive coverage?
Yeah.
Then?
We absolutely do have a package of mandatory training, as well as other training available to all officers in the council. And as part of this exercise, I'd be looking to see where is that already incorporated, because as the independent person's already pointed out, you may have done your induction, but where are you getting your refreshers? So is this now picked up through some of our other work? And I know that Rachel's looking at what we do to raise awareness around this subject matter as well.
Okay. Obviously, you mentioned Rachel there, and there's quite an important interaction with the internal audit. Is there any other observations or comments you'd like to add in relation to this item, Rachel?
Thanks, Chair. I think the only thing I'd add is that we do also do a National Fraud Awareness Week as well. So that's every November and ties in with the International Fraud Awareness Week. So we do always mention whistleblowing within that, but I certainly support any other wider proactive work and promotion as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll just see if there's any other for Councillor Jelly. Thank you.
If it's working. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's one of these things that it's very difficult for some people, if they've got concerns, to actually come forward and say, there's a problem and I want to report it. So I think it's got to be made as simple as it possibly can for people to be able to do that confidently and comfortably without feeling that they might be penalised afterwards. So I think that's an important part of the training side of it, and updated training going forward. So, but I think it's a really good policy, you know. I think it's important we keep on top of that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because counterintuitively, if it's a good policy, we'll probably get some reports. And, you know, if we were not getting any, it's probably not a very good policy, if you know what I mean. So the proof of the pudding will be, let's see if we get some whistleblowing reports, which we should expect to get for an organisation of this size and complexity and the sensitive nature of the stuff it deals with a lot of the time. So
yeah, and I think a lot of it is about learning from these reports that come through and what we can do to make sure in the future it minimises the risk to us as council.
okay, thank you for that. Just see if there's any more comments or observations. So there are a number of comments and observations which have been made, which will assist there, and if you could take those on board. Taking those into account, I'd like to ask the committee if they could recommend, in accordance with agenda item 3.1, if there's a proposer for that, please. Councillor Marks, and seconded by Councillor Lee. Just look for a vote on that, thank you. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. I think it'd also be useful, whilst we're talking about the governance aspects, we spoke at the last committee about additional reports, and it was felt that we might get a report from the monitoring officer report at this meeting. I just wanted to understand where we are on that. So perhaps if you could explain where we are and other associated reports as well, and when we can expect to receive them. Obviously, what I am mindful of is we're coming to the end of our time as a committee, I mean. So we've only got one more committee before the end of this council, and I'll mention some things later on. I'm very keen that we leave things in good order, because some of us may not be around, and we need some continuity going forward. So, and I want to make sure that all the aspects which are perhaps a bit, there's some gaps, I want to make sure they're picked up in the time and term of this council. So I look to the monitoring officer, and then if you want to add anything, Camilla, there as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, one of the reports that could be brought is the annual monitoring officer's report. There is no duty on the monitoring officer to bring that report, but it certainly is good practice for it to come and for members to be able to have sight of that. There are two routes that report can take, either via this committee or Democracy and Standards Committee. I've reviewed the terms of reference of both committees, and it's not picked up in either of those, which could go some way to explain why you haven't received one in this term. So it's something that we've picked up to do as part of the annual, as part of the Constitution review. The only other mechanism for it to sort of go is to full council, directly to full council, but I do feel that it should come via a committee before it goes to full council. It would feel odd for it to do it in that way. So it does require a constitution amendment to the terms of reference to either this committee or the Democracy and Standards Committee to facilitate that, but it is definitely a report that I think should be brought forward and should be presented to councillors. There is a lot of information contained within an annual monitoring officer's report that speaks to compliance across the board. So I think it's definitely a useful report and something that we have put onto the programme for the amendment so that it can be brought going forward.
Okay, Camilla?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sanjit, for that update. As the monitoring officers outlined, it isn't specifically within the terms of reference, and that is something we have on our radar to update as part of the Constitution review. Just to add to that, we do know that this has been picked up as part of the external governance report as one of the improvements, and whilst it isn't mandatory, as the monitoring officers highlighted, it is certainly considered to be best practice for an annual report to be brought. So whilst we don't have the constitutional mechanism to be able to do that, it would be possible to engage with both this committee and Democracy and Standards by way of a joint briefing in advance of it going to full council at a future date.
Okay, yes, thank you for that. Clearly it's best practice. I take the point that it's not in constitutionally, it's not in the terms of reference, but I'd like to request that one does come to the next committee. I don't think there's any reason it shouldn't. And I think that would neatly bring a conclusion to our deliberations over that. So is there any reason that wouldn't be able to be done?
Thank you, Chair. Presently, it's not in the terms of reference for the committee.
I understand. I understand
so
that.
Technically, so the way we could facilitate it is by doing an informal consultation with the committee and then present it to full council.
But we don't have to have everything set out in our terms of reference to ask people to report things to this committee.
Chair, if you wanted to request that, which I feel that you are, then we can bring it on this occasion and then we can have recommendation going forward that the terms of reference be updated to facilitate that. So happy to take it away in that way.
Members content with that? Yeah, so I think you can see it's felt to be very important. So if we could have that report for the
April, I think.
April meeting, yeah. So thank you for that. Thank you. So the next agenda item, I might ask you to do this quite slowly, so we've got enough time for the audit partner to come back. So agenda item 7, anti-money laundering policy. And Rachel Ashley-Corn, Chief Internal Auditor, could you present this item, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So at the last committee meeting, you received the updated anti-fraud and corruption policy and the updated anti-bribery policy. So part of that wider suite of ethical governance policies also includes our anti-money laundering policy. So you reviewed and approved those at the last meeting, and this is coming alongside those, or from part of that suite of policies. So the anti-money laundering policy is by nature a more complicated report, I would suggest. It's quite a complex area for officers to get their heads around and to understand. So what I've tried to do with it in this iteration is to provide a lot more in the form of guidance to support it as well. So there's now an Appendix 1 which provides guidance and examples and the sorts of warning signs to look out for as well, the sorts of things to be alert to in some of those situations. Sorry. And Appendix 2 and 3 are also new, that they provide template forms to use. I'm not sure what funny noise, no. Template forms to use in applying the policy as well. So other than that, the main content of the report hasn't changed, but it's coming to the committee for review and approval, and will then form part of that suite, as I said, of anti-fraud and corruption policies. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, but I'll take the policy itself as read by the committee and take questions on any of the detail. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Rachel. Michael Whitworth, thank you.
I'm just going to mimic your question previously, Chair, actually, was that the success of the policy is if people are using it. Have we actually had any use of the policy over recent times?
To you, Chair. No, I'm not aware of any recent referrals, no. And as I've said, I think the form in there now provides a referral form that people can use to send their concerns if they weren't sure what they needed to include. And also a form for the officer to use as well in handling it. So I can feel more confident there would be a record now of any concerns.
Yeah, so I think it's the same bit that you raised there yourself as well. So I think if we can think about those training aspects that we've similarly thought about as well, that'd be useful, because that's what gives them use, these policies. I just look to see if there's any other comments, questions or observations. If not, the recommendations are as set out in 3.1. It's recommended that we approve the anti-money laundering policy and guidance. So if I can, Councillor Lee is proposing that and Councillor Marks is seconding. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. So now I think if we can move on to agenda item 8, which is also Rachel, Chief Internal Auditor, and she'll present the Internal Audit Progress Report. I'll hand over to Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the latest update on the delivery of this year's Internal Audit Plan. So it forms the usual format that the committee are used to, but I will just walk you through some of the key sections as usual. So within the report on Appendix A from page 299 of the pack, is a full copy of the progress report. There's a copy of the Internal Audit Plan from page 308 of the pack, page 10 of the appendix. And that sets out for you all of the audit assignments this year and the status of each of those at the time of producing this report and the outcome of those which have been finalised. So members will note that there have been 7 audit reports finalised since the last committee meeting, and these are set out as usual in section 3 of the report from page 300 of the pack, page 2 of the appendix. So just walking briefly through those. The first was in relation to the housing service, and we've badged this as transitional tenancies. So this is looking at mutual exchanges and succession. So this is where the tenancy of a property is changing, due to either people swapping a property or succeeding the tenancy. So overall, we've concluded an assurance rating of moderate assurance. Sorry. I have to cough. A moderate assurance for the control environment and the compliance elements for this audit. We were happy with the control arrangements that were in place. There was a need to align them, similar to some of the previous reviews within housing across both the Corby and the Kettering sides, and this was already underway at the time of the audit already. So we did have some gaps in record keeping, and we've recommended the use of checklists across the board to make sure that we have those consistently recorded and that we always have the evidence to support things like identification checks on file and energy performance certificates as well for each of those transitional tenancies. Sorry, I just need a drink or something. I think I'm just getting some water. Thank you. The next was in relation to a kind of cross-cutting corporate review of decision-making and delegations. So this was more of a governance-related review. This was looking at how decisions are made across the organisation and how they're recorded. Thank you. To make sure we're complying with our constitutional requirements and that we're publishing decisions in the right way as well. Thank you. Right, so in terms of these, we were able to see that 100% of the decisions that we looked at had been taken in line with the Constitution, and they had been suitably published within the right arena. We did make some recommendations around improving some of the controls in relation to the recording of member training. So whilst we were satisfied that some member training was taking place, particularly, for example, with this committee, there was a lack of training records in place to make sure we had evidence of those. And there was also scope for better use of some of the template forms as well. So overall, we've given a level of moderate assurance for the control environment, a good level for compliance, and a low organisational risk. So the next related to adult services, and this was looking at our readiness for Care Quality Commission inspections. So this is essentially the adults version of Ofsted inspections that we want to prepare for, make sure that we're ready for our first inspection. So we were looking at the arrangements in place that the council had already applied to have self-assessments, to learn from those, take actions forward, to track any of the areas for improvement. We were satisfied with what had taken place and how they'd actively engaged in things like peer reviews through the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services and how those were being monitored in terms of outcomes. We also looked at the arrangements in place around conducting practice audits and how any outcomes were being tracked in relation to those. We did make some recommendations to further improve some of the controls just to make sure that all of the objectives are SMART and that they're being suitably and formally tracked. But overall, we gave a good level of assurance for both the design of the controls and the compliance element overall. So the next is one of our financial audits, which members of the committee may recall received a limited assurance opinion in 2023-24. So we were revisiting it again a little bit earlier this year so that we get some early assurance. We did note some improvement in terms of compliance rates. So this time we did have 76% of transactions had been reviewed. Obviously, that still means that almost a quarter of them hadn't been reviewed, so there does remain an element of non-compliance. We also looked at the management review, which was the next step. Once officers have reviewed their own transactions, they should be signed off by management. And again, there still remained a level of non-compliance. So whilst it had improved since the last audit, there still was a level of non-compliance with some of those expected controls. But what we were able to take note of during the audit was that in October 2024, an additional control was introduced whereby anyone who hadn't reviewed their transactions within the last 3 months would have their card withdrawn. So that did give us some additional comfort. And on that basis, we were able to raise the assurance rating to moderate, but we will be revisiting that next year to make sure that that improvement has been suitably applied and consistent in practice. And the next was in relation to the community strategy and strategic investment into the voluntary community and social enterprise sector. So this was essentially looking at our new community strategy, but also the means by which we've been issuing some grants to the community and social enterprise sector as well. So we're really satisfied with the arrangements in place in terms of the strategy, which had been approved, it'd been through the right mechanisms and had a framework in place for the period of 2024 to 27. It aligned really well with the council's corporate plan, and it included KPIs and reporting mechanisms to make sure that we were able to track and monitor the implementation of that strategy. What we did identify was some areas for improvement around the grants process, including due diligence checks, checking, for example, applicants' history of receiving grants, any potential conflicts of interest have been suitably recorded and acted upon, and looking at the process around the grants oversight board as well and how that's formalised. So overall, based on those findings, we gave a moderate assurance for the control environment, good level of compliance for use of those controls, and an organisational impact of low or overall on that finding. And the last 2 audits related to financial systems which are hosted within the lead authority group. So some are hosted by Cambridgeshire County Council, some by West Northamptonshire Council, and each of the audit teams rotate in terms of undertaking those audit reviews. So these actually related to the previous financial year, and members of the committee will remember that there was a limitation within my audit opinion for 23-24 awaiting the outcome of these audits. So I'm pleased that we now have all of the outcomes, although it's a bit later than we would have hoped. So the first was in relation to payroll. Generally, there appeared to be good processes around separation of duties, the starters and leavers processes and calculation of payments. Also in terms of the handling of data with HMRC and payroll file creation. What was noted was some errors around control accounts and reconciliation figures, which suggests a potential weakness within the review process. So on that basis, they gave a moderate assurance opinion for both the control environment and compliance. And this is the opinion of Cambridgeshire County Council, just to clarify, but this was based on their findings and their report, so I've just put it into our format for you. The last report was in relation to debt recovery. So again, this was conducted by Cambridgeshire County Council's internal audit team. They have given a good level of assurance for the controls and moderate for compliance. This was on the basis that there is a comprehensive debt recovery framework in place, with automated reminders being issued when people haven't paid their debts. But there was scope for improving some of the areas of compliance and also making use of things like a performance dashboard, which is used by some of the other partners, and also formalising our use of debt collection agencies and automated recovery letters as well, just to make sure that was more formalised and consistent between what's in the policy and what's happening in practice. So there's some scope for improvement which is being taken forward with the finance teams. And as I say, a medium organisational impact overall based on the opinion of the Cambridgeshire County Council Internal Audit Service. So also within the report is an update on the implementation of agreed actions arising from audits. So that's provided as a summary on page 319 of the pack, page 12 of the appendix. So this shows that of the 145 actions which were due, 45 have been completed and 100 remain overdue. 74 of those are over 3 months overdue and 26 are under 3 months overdue. And there are 4 that fall into the category of being over 3 months overdue and of a high priority. As usual, those 4 are provided in full detail for you in table 3 from page 320 of the pack. The first 3 of those the committee have seen previously, and it's the latest update on those for you with the latest revised dates. The 4th action is actually the first time it has hit that trigger and relates to the highways maintenance contract, and that's provided with comments along with the other actions. We've also included on page 322 the latest customer satisfaction feedback and some comments that we've received with some of our customer surveys when we've completed our internal audit reports, and those have been finalised with customers. And that's a run through of the report, but just to also mention, as I've mentioned in the covering report, we are required at least every 5 years to have an external quality assessment of the internal audit service under the current internal audit standards, and that will remain the case under the new standards as well. We thought it would be timely to have an assessment now so that we can assess and inform the annual report for 24-25, but also so that we can undertake a gap analysis and identify what we need to do to align with the new global internal audit standards, which come in from the 1st of April. So we wanted to take that opportunity. So that's underway at the moment. I'm receiving some feedback on the outcome of that this week, and the outcome will be reported in full to this committee and will also inform the annual report that comes to you at the end of the financial year as well. And that will involve conversations with or surveys with a number of customers, with chairs of audit committees, and a review of a sample of our files as well. So hopefully that will go smoothly and I'll be able to report an outcome to you soon. So that is a run through of the report today, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Just see if there's any questions or comments or observations. It's encouraging that there was no really significant points raised in since the last meeting. One question I did have was over government procurement cards. Obviously that was risky area before, and I think it's an inherently risky area, and I know you said it's moved up. I just wanted to get some assurance that you felt was that obviously you felt it was sufficient, but I'm always very concerned about those because it's always retrospective authorisation. You're just picking things up after they've happened there. So I wonder if you give us a bit more insight there, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as I've said, we looked at the compliance within the different stages of the process. So each transaction should be reviewed by the cardholder to make sure there's no transaction on there that they don't recognise. So there could have been a fraud externally. but also then it's subject to management review as well. So what we've tried to do in this case, in this year's audit, was to understand the root cause behind why people were not reviewing them as well. I think in some cases we were able to identify some system access issues, so hopefully that will help to resolve it going forward. But I'm also reassured by the action that's been taken at the conclusion of the audit, and we are being copied into a note of correspondence in that I believe it's a monthly review of compliance that's now going out to any officers and also the senior management for the area to show who hasn't complied. So there is a much stronger process in place now, and I'm hopeful we will have a better level of compliance at the next audit.
Okay, thank you for that further assurance. One of the things that sticks out to me, and I think we've spoken about this over recent committees, and I feel it's quite disappointing, is the number of overdue recommendations. I think it's one of those things that's creeped up, and we haven't perhaps been as harsh or as hard at this committee as we perhaps should have been, and it still remains over 100. And I'll ask Claire to comment in a moment, because I know she took up some responsibility and actions to try and force ownership of this and ensure that they come down. I do have some suggestions about those, because we've got 4 high-risk ones now, which are over 3 months overdue. We've seen them move a number of times. All the dates are due for the 31st of March this year, and what I'd like to suggest is that if they're not done, then the relevant officers come and explain why, because they've moved so many times now. So I'd like a positive report that they're either dealt with, those four in particular, or come and explain to the committee why they haven't, especially as some of them have been moved multiple times. So I'll ask Claire, because I know she did take an action on this, and she might be able to update us on the outcome of that and the status. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, what we have done and what we've undertaken is around the compliance in general for Northamptonshire. So as statutory officers, we have tried to ensure that we can deal with this. So we have set up a budget and performance board on a monthly basis. So that's where all performance, KPIs, compliance issues are monitored, policed, and that information and message is being sent back out into the organisation around accountability, ownership and action. Today, we've also had a compliance workshop with our corporate leadership network in order to also understand and ascertain why compliance has not been raised, adhered to or actioned. So I think, we are trying to ensure that it's on the radar. We're trying to ensure that we have that leadership in there to show that we are enacting this and we have taken that responsibility. And I want to provide assurance back to this committee that this is something we are keen to ensure that we can comply with and make sure that we get the answers and can really start to make some inroads into reducing those outstanding actions as well. So I think that's something that we're sort of very alive to and trying to ensure that we can endorse throughout the organisation.
Okay, well, thanks for taking that forward and highlighting that. Obviously, you don't speak for the other officers responsible, and 3 of those aren't yours. 1 is yours. I can ask you specifically about yours. Do you think that one will be done by the 31st of March? And is there any reason that you're aware of why the other ones might not be done by 31st of March at this point? And maybe Rachel may have some insight here as well.
We have requested at the meeting workshop that we just had today that all areas who do have high risk audit recommendations deal with them and that they actually are complied with, so we can actually bring a more positive outcome to the next Audit and Governance Committee in April. So we are making sure that those relevant officers are alive to that conversation and again trying to ensure that those action points have actually been implemented and taken. In relation to the one for finance, I'm sure Dean will probably respond to this as well. Essentially ours has been outstanding purely because we've obviously had an external audit to complete and 3 sets of accounts, but again it doesn't take away from there has been action being taken on it, just not as much as we would like to have done given the resources that we've had, but I'm sure I'll probably invite Dean to respond to that as well.
Yeah, there's probably sort of 2 areas on ours where we need to move forward. So one of those is that obviously we've had changes in systems throughout that period of time, so that we're looking to sort of close some of those control accounts down. So therefore no monitoring will be required because those legacy arrangements won't exist. And the other bits around the having the oversight of those lead authority reconciliations. So we have some comfort that they're being done and shared. We just need to make sure that we get some further more robust oversight in place on those. So I'm confident that we'll be able to hit those dates.
Okay, no pressure then. I'll take that as that you'll have it done by the next one then. Thank you. Any comments, Rachel, that from your internal audit perspective? Obviously you follow these up and you've seen, obviously you do the great work and then people agree to do them and then they don't happen. That's what's really, you know, I feel like we haven't perhaps collectively as a committee pushed hard enough on this, and I think we should start pushing really hard.
Yeah, so I'd certainly, as you say, like to see the number of overdue actions coming down, and I know that it's got that support now from senior management. In terms of those 4 high priority actions, I think the issue with that oldest one that's been on there for quite some time has been a lot of changeover in personnel in the area and a high number of changes in at senior management level. But I have been reassured that the revised date is March, so I can only take what I've been advised. So I would hope that we will see an improved position, and it will be important. I have flagged that it will inform my annual report for 24-25 as well. So it'll be a really important line in the sand of how many have been implemented by the end of March 2025. So I'm hopeful we can get an improved position before then.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lee?
Yeah, it's just about the intelligent client function in governance of the Children's Trust, because that is so important, and I see that's been outstanding for 3 years. But it's not just a small item, it's something that should improve. What it's about commissioning and quality assurance monitoring of services is very important in an area where spending has been perceived to be out of control. So this is extremely important. But we've been given the revised date of March 2025, so I've certainly got my eye on that one.
Thank you for that. Just look and see if there's anything else. Whilst we're on internal audit matters, there's a couple of things that have also been happening. Thank you for those who are involved in the self-assessment. I think that we come in to the next committee. I've had sight of it. We're not going to go through it today, but I think it was a very valuable piece, and all the, we'll talk about it next time. It was really useful. So thank you for all those that were involved in that. And thank you for those who attended the planning meeting for the next year. That was really useful. It gave us some useful. I think it gave Rachel some useful thoughts there. One other thing, and I talked about leaving things in good order, and of course we do an annual report, and one of the problems we may have is some of us may not be here. I might not be here. Some of us may not be here. Some of us are moving on. So what I suggested to Rachel was that she, whilst we're all together, that we have a half-yearly report, so we can assess what's happening there. So do you want to just say a few words about what you're going to do there and the thoughts that we had on this, Rachel?
Yes, thank you, Jess. So usually the audit committee would receive this annual report around the November meeting, which covers the last annual period. So what we've proposed is that we will do one from the end of the last annual report through to the end of March, and bring that to the next meeting in April, and that will give you then that summary of all of your work during the financial year and this term of the committee. So we'll then obviously be able to review whether or not that goes as a formal report, but I thought that would be useful to have that draw that line in the sand at the end of March.
Okay, thank you for that. If there are recommendations, excuse me, let me just flip back. So the recommendation is that we note the internal audit progress report attached as Appendix A and consider the main issues arising. If I could look for a proposal for that, Councillor Marks and Councillor Lee, all those in favour, please show. Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay, so that concludes all the items on the agenda, apart from agenda item 5. We certainly need to have the audit partner here for that. So we'll perhaps just take a short break and maybe have a